Today, the world watches with bated breath as the Middle East stands at a critical tipping point, with the United States and Iran locked in a high-stakes confrontation. In the midst of this escalating tension, Israel has solidified its position as a key strategic player, leading joint military operations alongside the United States. How did Israel become such a powerful ally of the United States? But the relationship between Washington and Israel was not always this way. The deep-seated bond we see today has evolved through decades of consistent and massive support from the United States. Over the years, through approximately $3.8 billion in annual military aid, the U.S. has enabled Israel to grow into a global, technological, and military powerhouse. This sustained investment has deeply integrated the two nations' defense industries, ensuring a steady and predictable demand for advanced American hardware. And now, this economic intertwining stretches far beyond defense. Israel has also become a vital global tech hub, housing the essential research and development centers of American giants like Intel and Google. This means that a crisis in Israeli security is no longer just a regional conflict, but a direct operational threat to the heart of the American economy, as the vital R&D centers of big tech leaders face immediate risk if Middle East conflicts intensify. So, for the United States, this relationship is no longer just a matter of foreign policy, but a critical pillar of its own national and economic security. Then, the real question becomes clear. Why did the United States come to support this distant nation with such immense resources? And how did they establish such a powerful and unique alliance? To understand the true reasons, we must look back to the moment when their destinies first began to intertwine. In 1948, at the very moment of its birth, Israel was a nation standing on the brink of immediate collapse. Surrounded by hostile neighbors and lacking a formal military infrastructure, the survival of this new state was far from guaranteed. During these desperate early years, the United States was not the unwavering protector we see today, but a distant observer prioritizing its own strategic interests. At the time, Washington was deeply concerned about maintaining stable access to Middle Eastern oil, and feared that supporting Israel would alienate the powerful Arab energy producers. As a result, the United States maintained a strict arms embargo on Israel, effectively cutting off the supply of the very weapons the small nation needed for its survival. This period of cold detachment meant that Israel had to look elsewhere for its defense, often struggling to secure even the most basic resources through covert and secondary channels. In this way, the early relationship between these two nations was defined by a calculated distance, where American economic security was weighed more heavily than the survival of a fledgling ally. For the young Israeli state, this isolation was a harsh lesson in the reality of international politics, where national interests often override shared values. But within this cold environment of calculated diplomacy, a series of seismic shifts in the global landscape began to rewrite the rules of their partnership. Eventually, a sequence of decisive economic and political events emerged to transform this distant relationship into the unbreakable bond we recognize today. The turning point began in the 1960s and 70s, as the Cold War reached a fever pitch in the Middle East. During this period, the Soviet Union was aggressively expanding its influence by forming deep alliances with major Arab nations and providing them with advanced weaponry. This sudden shift in the balance of power forced the United States to reconsider its entire Middle Eastern strategy, as Washington realized it desperately needed a stable and capable partner to act as a counterweight to Soviet expansion. Then, in 1973, the world was struck by a massive economic disaster known as the First Oil Shock. This crisis, triggered by an Arab oil embargo, forced the United States to realize that its economic survival depended on maintaining a firm grip on Middle Eastern stability. Facing these dual threats of geopolitical collapse and economic ruin, American leadership made a historic and calculated decision. They chose Israel as their primary strategic anchor, an unsinkable asset in the heart of the world's most volatile energy corridor. And to solidify this new role, the United States began pouring billions of dollars in economic and military aid into Israel, effectively transforming the nation into a regional enforcer of Western interests. This massive influx of capital was not just about defense, but served as a long-term investment to ensure that American influence remained dominant in the global energy market. What started as a desperate marriage of convenience soon evolved into a deeply integrated partnership where the security of one nation became the economic necessity of the other. Finally, this bond, born from the urgent needs of security and survival, has evolved through the decades into a massive and unbreakable economic blood alliance. Today, this alliance functions as a sophisticated and highly efficient engine for both the American defense industry and the global tech economy. At first glance, the billions of dollars in annual military aid might look like a simple gift. But in reality, the majority of these funds are structured to flow directly back into the United States. Under specific legal agreements, Israel is required to spend a significant portion of this aid on advanced hardware manufactured by American defense giants like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. In this sense, the aid acts as a massive government subsidy that fuels innovation and job creation within the American industrial base, while simultaneously keeping Israel equipped with the world's most sophisticated weaponry. But the integration goes far beyond military hardware, as the digital heart of the United States is now deeply synchronized with Israeli innovation. Israel has become a critical hub for the world's most influential tech companies, with giants like Intel, Microsoft, and Google establishing their most vital research and development centers within its borders. This means that the next generation of semiconductors and artificial intelligence often begins its life in Israeli labs, making the stability of this small nation a matter of direct concern for the entire Silicon Valley supply chain. As a result, any threat to Israeli security is no longer just a local conflict, but a direct operational risk to the most powerful corporations on the NASDAQ. Through this deep intertwining of capital and technology, the two nations have built a relationship where their economic futures are virtually inseparable. Yet, beneath the surface of this powerful golden alliance remains a heavy burden of costs and risks that the United States must continue to carry. As the years pass, the staggering amount of annual financial aid is no longer viewed as an unquestioned necessity by all segments of the American public. Amidst rising domestic economic challenges, a growing sense of fatigue has begun to emerge, leading many to wonder if these vast resources could be better spent on internal infrastructure or social programs. This shifting public opinion has created a delicate political environment where the once solid consensus on unconditional support is now being tested by the realities of a changing global economy. Furthermore, the diplomatic cost of this relationship is becoming increasingly complex, especially when the independent military actions of Israel clashed with the broader foreign policy goals of the United States. At times, the strategic priorities of the two nations do not perfectly align, forcing Washington to navigate a difficult path between loyalty to its closest ally and the need to maintain stable relations with other global powers. These moments of friction represent a significant opportunity cost, as American leadership must spend immense diplomatic capital to manage the fallout from regional escalations. In this environment of calculated risks, the economic and political price of maintaining this alliance is being weighed more carefully than ever before. So, the challenge for the future lies in balancing the deep-rooted benefits of this partnership against the undeniable burden of its evolving costs. Then, the final question is this: through all these immense expenses and deep-seated conflicts, what will the path forward for these two nations actually look like? To answer this, we must look at the emerging landscape of the global economy, where new strategic power blocks are constantly being formed. In the coming years, the rise of competing technological powers will likely force the United States and Israel to double down on their partnership, as their combined expertise in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity becomes an indispensable shield against shared rivals. Furthermore, the evolving energy markets and the shift toward new economic corridors in the Middle East will create an environment where a stable and technologically advanced ally is more valuable than ever before. This means that despite the internal fatigue and diplomatic friction, the fundamental structure of this alliance is built to endure, driven by a cold but necessary logic of mutual survival. History is ultimately recorded through the vast flow of national interests and the calculated strategies of those who seek to direct that flow. To some, this relationship may appear as nothing more than a cold economic balance sheet, but for others, it represents a vital lifeline where the very survival of a nation is at stake. So, this unique and complex bond will remain one of the most powerful variables shaping the future of the global order. And perhaps today, within these intricate entanglements, we have caught a glimpse of the hidden logic that will drive the world of tomorrow.